Greetings, chromatic warriors! Coming back again to work on a tiny tank. Yes, I've heard of the channel. Bill is making stuff and I enjoy it. Why do you ask? This is similar to some of the work he does. There's something about very large things and yet also very small things that I enjoy. It's a miniature. But what this allows is to create things on a more epic scale. No pun intended. Thanks to GW for sending me this copy of Legions Imperialis. It's full of a lot of cool kits, and I couldn't quite decide, so I went a little mad with it. First, I painted up a small detachment on a Sunday afternoon to just see what I could accomplish. I also had to paint a Warhound Titan because this is my chance to have another painted Titan and do it quickly. But also admiring these kits and some spare parts that I had left over, this is what I came up with. The Warhead Mark I. A couple notes on the construction. The main piece being it's a War Master Titan head that I had left over from a previous kit. You see those jewelry chains that are kind of looking like cabling? Well, it's jewelry chain, friend. And for the clouds of dust, I used some plastic putty, and you can see how it was suspended with the tweezers overnight so everything dried in the right shape. This piece is about visual impact. Of course, all miniature painting is to an extent, but there are many different forks in the road that this becomes. And this, I wanted to capture just more of the momentum, create a bold color palette complementing this cool green with a warm orange, and just create generally a lot of heavy metal berserk attitude. If you're a fan of heavy metal, you may recognize, some symmetries between this and certain death metal albums. A common theme will be like a gigantic mech just covered in guns, or a skull tank covered in guns, rear and front. Angel Corpse comes to mind, but I could rant about metal another time. But let's talk about painting this tank. Okay, this is going to be a fun one. Most chaotic. Let's break things down, and I will use the airbrush to block things off. First of all, old reliable, some matte black. You've all seen base coats before, so I'm not going to waste too much time. Alright, suitably darkened. I'll pull out one of my house favorites, Crow Hue. Just lay down a zenithal pass. But I want to keep in mind that, the viewing angle, the model is tilted forward. He's in a bit of a downhill angle. So I guess mostly on the round head that's going to be a large factor. Yeah, the rear too, these flat panels would receive more of a broad light. I'll be able to adjust things with the brush, but yeah, this will get me started nice and quick. Okay, let's talk about that base. Laying down a nice even coat of molten orange, and the zenithal base coat is going to work very well for me. This is the one time when that transparency is applied, and yeah, I have a black and white sketch applied, so if I'm wise, I will spray my airbrush similarly to the way I sprayed the white spray paint. This is very absorbent, so I'm just going to let this sit and dry for one pass, and then before I change my tools over, see what I've got. Alright, and you see that? Much more desaturated after it's had a moment to dry, so go ahead and just apply a little bit more paint, but again, keeping that angle in mind. That's working out very nicely. Okay, and now while I have molten orange still loaded in the airbrush, let's just raise things up. About a 50-50 addition of skeleton bone. I'm going to lay down a highlight, but I want to be a little choosy about where I place it. You have these knobs that are sticking outward. Just want to catch those very lightly with, just small dots of light, basically. Just spraying a little globe of highlight down. Yeah, very nice. And the same as before, I'm going to go back and add just another layer. Just through saturation, you can see get a little bit more of a buildup, a little bit more gradation. It's just earth though, so it can be a little rough. I think that kind of sells the material. Lovely earth tones. I'm going to bring a little bit of Barren yellow into the situation, and I'll be applying this as a mid-tone. I don't want to completely cover anything up. You see it's just going to add a little bit more visual interest, kind of break things up, add to the warm desert tones. But yeah, just selectively. I grab a little bit of some of these shadow areas on the bulbs. Less is more at times. Put a little bit over here as well. Man, what fun it is airbrushing a textured object. I'm going to chase that feeling in the future. I'll take a dry brush out, and I've added some skeleton bone onto it. And yeah, you can't look at a textured surface like this without a brief visitation to the dry brush. So just selectively, lightly, I don't want to have just a uniform lift. Still paying attention to the dimension of these shapes. Just trying to, lead things upwards. My natural instinct at this point is to add a wash to the situation, but I'll save my sauce for later in the process. Maybe I want to wash everything with brown. Anyways, molten orange into the airbrush. And let's just add some gentle tinting over all of those subtleties. Kind of bonding it back together. You can see that dry brushing shows through just slightly. I'm adding just the thinnest layer of orange. Lovely. Time for a little brushwork. I have some of that lovely crow hue added to my palette. So it's an airbrush paint. They run very thin. So I wouldn't recommend just painting your model straight up with airbrush paints. But I can use it as a little bit of a kick in the right direction and tint some of this lovely ice yellow from the Fanatic range. Be nice and proper. Yeah, let's get some white involved as well. Yeah, so you see I'm just making a climb from crow hue up to ice yellow, and then once I get to a certain point in that elevation, I'm going to be adding white into the situation. But yeah, I think I'll be able to get away with just highlighting up through these three colors. I say that because I already have so much going on, just from the airbrushing over that black. But keeping that angle in mind, he is tilted forward slightly. So a lot of these highlights are going to be wrapping backwards. There's a lovely amount of very tiny details. I enjoy the scale of this. It's funny how I'll complain about something being overly detailed at the 35mm scale. But I don't know, it must just be the vehicular nature. Something I like about a tiny tank and all of its tech. You can see I just have a lot of light navigation to do. I just want to show you some brushwork though. I'm sure it will make sense in the end, the perspective. We've already talked about that. But generally something this small as well, you want very, very high contrast. The smaller something is, the higher the contrast should be. Think of that as a general approach. Because it is so small, we want it to be rendered with a lifelike kind of volume to it. And it's not going to catch the light the same way as a life-sized object, so I'm trying to enhance that. Yeah, just lots of blending. Really enjoy this crow hue. It's a nice off-green color. But I'll stop yapping. I'm going to just paint for the next hour or so with this one color, because this is a big step. Everything after this will be faster and faster as all the blends take place inside of this progression. And I'll make sure that I get at least 3 layers laid into a blend before I decide it's bad. You can see this one that I've been focusing on. Now it's looking nice. Need a little bit more treatment, just thin, controllable, diluted layers. Let's lay down one more. I'm going extra thin. I'll start back here. Yeah, you can see that as like dirty paint water. It's a little over diluted, but I can always lick the brush and just absorb some up off of it. Yeah, just the thinnest hint of a tint. I know it's there because I've made the surface wet. But in some cases it really is that thin. So let me get this going. Hi there, Sam Lenz dropping in. Remember that last step when I was admiring all these tiny little machine-like details and then thinking I would just paint up all of these armor panels before basically reaching inside the machine to paint the inner workings? Yeah. So I wanted to share how this progression was looking, and I did find myself using some of this pure crow hue to paint with. It's a little hard to control because it's an airbrush paint, but as for sliding a glaze in place, it's nice. You know, I'm finding just through the volumes that have come out from the airbrushing that, yeah, there are some areas where I just want a little more of that crow hue kind of reaching down into the shadows. It looks a little stark, so I'm working that up. Seems to be okay. But also I've added true copper and gunmetal to my palette. And yeah, there are some, some areas tucked inside, like, right up here next to the face, these kind of inner cogs and gears that are going to have to be picked out. And I'll approach them with silver and that true copper just to break things up in a pleasing way. It's just important that the machine looks large. So the people working on this at this scale, they're going to create much more small variations. So yeah, let me just chop away at these metallics and do some blending. But that's how it's going. We'll get those things done before jumping up to the next step. Hello again, it's me, Sam Lenz. I just wanted to share, I'm getting up into these very tight peaks of light, and just keeping in mind, that optimal viewing perspective. I just want to share the importance of these reflections and their tightness. I think it also just adds to the mood of this piece, having this speeding metal machine gleaming in the light. Just kind of adds to the feel of it, for me at least. And I think I would like to see another one of these gleaming reflections coming up through here. It'll take a little while to work it up to the levels of the others. Just drop down to some crow hue. But yeah, every smooth progression has a rough start. Just get my colors in place there, kind of test that angle. Yeah, that'll be nice. I'm sure I'll find space for some smaller reflections on the body of the tank as well, but I think most of that can be accomplished with tiny dots and slashes. And after I've used up a bit of the paint on my brush, down to just a trace amount, let's be building this up with the most thin of glazes. Yeah, you see, less is more, just letting those progressions breathe. Large shadow, large mid-tone, very tight highlight. That's the look. Hey, not bad. I like the way the lighting is coming together. I'm going to grab some deep gray. Just throw it. See, I can see I've already thrown it on the other weapon barrel casings. So those gun casings don't need much dimension. I'm going to throw a wash all over everything, but we do have these large tubers up here. So let me just throw down a base coat of black. Then I will take some worn stone, and just keeping in mind, the model's going to be tilted forward slightly. So the brightest point in that reflection, it's going to be at the top of this arc. So I'll be wet blending a brighter point in here. You can always go back and add more of that lighter ingredient. I'll take just a very, very small amount, keep piling it on. All right, maybe a little more black. There we go. Yeah, just like that. Not too shabby. I'm going to take black and that worn stone mixed together. We'll just very lightly brush on kind of a reflective glint on the old tuber here. Probably go a little bit brighter. It's basically pure worn stone. Make sure to take some off of your brush so it's just gathering on the raised surface. With those tubers secured, come in with some strong tone. Just lay some of the blackness over all the bronze, the gray, the metallic trim. I'll throw some onto the tube. Yeah, you see how that soaks into the crevices. Any of that messiness all goes away in the wash. Into the eye of warfare. I have a base coat of molten lava laid in place. It's going to do the old gem effect. So adding a little black to that molten lava, that'll give me a brown. And then I'll be adding demonic yellow to brighten, lifting up into a lighter orange. Yes, that's the ticket. It's a very small area, so blending won't matter quite as much as just making sure each color is visible. It's important to step through a certain amount of colors to really get that depth and the gleam and shine of the illuminated lens / gemstone. So you see I'm kind of pulling my shadow in a circular shape, and the highlight is being laid in a crescent moon shape. Just go a little bit deeper now with black. You see, don't completely cover up that brown portion. Even lighter and brighter with more demonic yellow, but I won't cover that entire crescent moon. I'm just shrinking down inside of that shape. Let's add another touch of black. One more mixed yellow highlight. Okay. Throw a little bit of white in with that. Just like so. Let's go back and add some extra taps of paint to make sure things are saturated. Then I'll take a bead of pure white, try to get this reflective glint. All right, decent. Maybe a second. I want to make that one a little larger. Paint is drying out on the brush. Nothing to it. Let's talk about these dusty trails. I have a little molten orange that I'm thinning down on my palette off to the side. You can see I've already laid down one coat. I'm taking this diluted, very diluted paint. It might take a few passes to get a good, bold representation of the color built up. You can see how gravity is doing the work for me, sinking in around those rumbling smoke shapes. Not bad. I'll come back in now with the airbrush loaded up with that same color, Molten Orange. And yeah, we're just going to get a little bit of dust flying up on the treads, right along the sides of the tracks. Go gradually. You can see how quickly that's being covered up. I just want very trace, subtle amounts. Let that dry for a minute. Now for a second pass. Go a little heavier after holding it up to the plinth. I want this kind of emerging from the dusty cloud, you know, so if it gradiates into that dirt color, well, good. Smokin'! Now it's time for a final round of highlights. I'll be taking shining silver, and I really want to take my time with this. Again, you know, this needs to look very micro, so I want tiny silvery peaks on these highlights. I won't completely line out an edge. You can see what I'm kind of lifting and dropping. I'm trying to add as much dimension to these as I can. Yeah, just a little less uniform. You don't want to color in the entire upper edge. Think in the tiny dots and slashes mentality. I'll also take a mixture of that worn stone with black. You can see I've started to line out a lot of these black / deep gray portions. Pick out these little hoses. And yeah, this is why I airbrushed before highlighting, so I could pull these back out. You know, I wanted them to shine above the dirt. Just a small, subtle touch, but I think it's a little more efficient painting that way. And once I get through those stages, we'll see how happy I am with these final highlights. But all I'm going to be doing is, you know, just like with the metals, the tiny dots and slashes. Make sure these sharpened peaks are looking their pointiest. Go on a little bit of a rivet hunt. Well, that looked a little rough, but just connect the line. I like it. Just a final kind of a victory lap. But it's important after you've done this much painting to not rush yourself. You know, treat this, even though it's a small and short stage, the impulse is to rush. Give it the same attention that all the previous layers have been given.
Magnifique, the Warhead, Mark I, ready to spray a hail of bullets in a generally forward-facing firing arc. As I look at this piece, as always, I'm filled with hindsight. Every piece is an experiment, and while I'm happy with this, my imagination always keeps running. I really enjoy the negative space and momentum of this piece, and I'm left thinking if there's ways I can add to it. Maybe some bursting explosions inside of the canyon, the clouds of dust could be kind of extending, maybe going in a loop, you know, kind of curling around. That would add some sort of fun momentum and an interesting shape to the silhouette. Well, yeah, canyon crashing. But as always, artwork is never finished. It is only abandoned. Thank you for dropping in. I hope you enjoyed this video. I appreciate your support. If you're watching this on YouTube, consider hitting the like and the subscribe button. Are you thinking about it? Alright. To all my patrons, again, a big thank you, and I'll see you on the next one. But until we meet, remain unchained.